This is a video about Inuit people doing it doggy style. I'm Aidan, and welcome to the Lore Lodge. If you like what we're doing here at the Lore Lodge, please consider subscribing to our Patreon, liking this video, sharing, hitting that notification bell, just generally showing us some love. If not, then at least please don't dislike it, because that hurts us in the algorithm. In 1887, the first reported case of the Dogman was reported. Now, of course, this is very apocryphal and anecdotal, and most stories of the Dogman didn't actually hit the airwaves, so to speak, until the 1980s. But when they finally did, this local legend from Michigan kind of exploded onto the national stage, but especially in the Great Lakes region, specifically with Michigan and Wisconsin. Now, what happened here was that there was a local legend of a half-dog, half-man creature that would stalk the forests at night in Michigan. Cool, kind of a typical werewolf story. But in 1987, a radio broadcaster released a song called The Legend, which was about the Dogman. And the initial idea was that this was just an April Fool's prank, but they got so many requests for it that they kept playing it and adding to it, and over time, they also started to have a lot of people calling in, or writing them, saying that the Dogman was real, and they had experienced it, and they had met it, or at the very least, seen it. Now, you might look at this and say, well, that was obviously a trick made up for the radio and the newspapers and whatnot, which is what I did when I first heard the story. I was like, that's ridiculous, That's not real, like Bigfoot. You should see the look I just got from the guy behind the camera. But the Dogman does have a lot of, at the very least, anecdotal accounts. So I thought we'd go through some of them and work backwards, almost. So we're going to start with the Dogman, as it was reported in the 1980s, and where that legend came from, and then work our way back to see if we can find an origin for if this could actually be something real. Because, as you guys know, that's what I like to do here, is look at folklore and see, alright, well, where's the origin point of this story? And in this case, well, if you saw the intro to the video, that should give you an idea. Anyway, in 1887, a group of lumberjacks in Michigan said that they had seen a large, dog-like man roaming the woods, and it scared the hell out of them, and they ran back to their cabins and whatnot. But, lumberjacks are kind of prone to drinking, especially in the 1880s. You might also recall that there was the story of the hide behind that has to do with drunken lumberjacks because, it is warded off by alcohol, which just seems like a great excuse to drink on the job. There's another attested account that I found from the early 1900s, but it wasn't very clear. It was basically just like, hey, I saw a Dogman. But in 1938, Robert Fortney, one of the more famous Dogman reporters, claimed that he had been attacked by 5 wild dogs, one of which was standing upright and between 6 and 10 feet tall with piercing blue eyes. Now, Robert did what any self-respecting American would do, and he shot at it, and it ran away. And for those of you who are from Michigan, this occurred around Paris, Michigan. I'm not from Michigan. In fact, I am inclined at this moment to inform you all that it is, Aidan, what time is it?
8:04.
It is 8:04 p.m., and Michigan still sucks. Then, throughout the 1950s, reports came out of Allegan County that were reporting essentially the same thing as had been reported in Paris by Robert. Now, I have to be clear about this. Robert did report this story directly to the radio, but he did that in 1987, 50 years after it actually occurred. And I do want to point out one thing about the dates here. Part of the legend that sprung up from the local region was that the Dogman only appears once every decade, or at least 1 year of every decade, which is the year that ends in 7. Now, originally, from what I can find, there are stories about this that take place absolutely in other years other than 7. So that seems to have been either a later addition or an adjustment to the canon of this legend to make it more radio-friendly. So just to be clear, while there is the whole thing about it's only every 10 years on the 7th year, that seems to not be part of the original legend here. That is a later portion. Some of the most compelling evidence for the Dogman comes from a story from 1961 when a night watchman was working at a factory and he saw something moving between the lights which lit up the road. He took a closer look. To him, it looked like a giant dog person. So he took out his camera, he snapped a picture of it, and the picture that is floating right next to my head right now is in fact that picture. Now, as you can see, it's quite grainy, it's very hard to make out, but what's interesting about it is that the photograph that was submitted to the newspaper was a negative. They gave them the original negative, not just the produced copy. So, a negative is much, much, much harder to fake than just handing somebody a finished copy of a photograph. So, this is one of the few times where when people say, well, where's the pictures of it? We actually kind of do have pictures. Now, you can claim it's a guy in a suit if you want to, but it's pretty good, like, Hollywood quality special effects if that is just a guy in a suit. So, I mean, look at the picture, come to your own conclusions, that's up to you. And the most recent piece of alleged evidence I can find is a 2006 call between a driver and OnStar, which is a roadside assistance company. And in the call, what you hear is essentially a guy saying something just ran across the road. He describes it as being, a large bipedal dog, and says, this is what I saw, and they dispatch a state trooper and everything. I highly recommend that you go watch the video. It's on YouTube. You can get the entire audio. We'll probably even link it in the description of this video. So, you can go check that out if you want. Again, these are all alleged. I cannot independently verify that any of this evidence is not tampered with, but this is kind of the way that the story goes. And it kind of fits in with something else that was reported, not in Michigan, but in its very nearby neighbor, Wisconsin. We have a friend in Wisconsin. She has not reported the Dogman. That could be because she has a very large German Shepherd. In any case, the Beast of Bray Road was reported between 1988 and 1992. Why is that interesting? Because that is the period during which the Dogman song that was produced in Michigan was becoming very famous. Now, of course, Michigan, Wisconsin, different states, but very close to each other. And Bray Road, if I remember correctly, is on the eastern side of Wisconsin. So, not too far-fetched that people who live in this area might have the same legend. And there was a reporter who went back and documented all of this, but again, I could not independently verify that anything she said was not complete fabrication. So, but much like the Dogman, the Beast of Bray Road was described as being 6 to 7 feet tall and was allegedly first seen in 1936, with a reported surge in sightings from 1989 to 1992. This was a hairy beast with a dog-like body, with the head of a wolf, and it ran both on 2 legs and on 4 legs. So, very, very, very similar to the Michigan one, but also at a time when sightings of this thing were at an all-time high, possibly driven by the radio station that was making the song. Now, one thing that isn't super connected to that is something we've done an entire video on, and that is the Palmyra Wolves incident and the Beast of Turner. Now, the Palmyra Wolves incident, many of you might know from Paranormal Witness or Mr. Ballin's channel. Essentially, a family moves into a house in Palmyra, and they are terrorized for an entire night by a pack of giant wolf creatures that seem to come out of this den they found in the woods. They reported a very bad smell from it, and then, one night they were just kind of sitting on their porch, looking out, and out in the driveway they saw something watching them. They decided to go inside, and for the entire night you get this account of a group of 5 to 10 of these creatures just running around the property, climbing on the house, howling, screeching, just scaring the hell out of this family. And that does fit in very well with the description of the Dogman. But it also is 20 years later, so it doesn't quite fit the surge in popularity theory, that the reason for all of these sightings is because of a popular radio show. And it was also in Palmyra, Maine, which is nowhere near Wisconsin or Michigan. So the question that you have to ask is, what is this? Is this the same thing? Also, in this case, it moves in packs, but the Dogman seems to be more of a solitary creature, or it runs with packs of wild dogs or wolves, and it's the alpha. So there's a little bit of variation in the story, but enough similarities to beg the question, are these two occurrences related? And the Beast of Turner incident is another one where there was a Beast of Turner that they found that appeared to be genetically a mix between a husky and a wolf, but people also reported seeing something much like the Dogman, running around. In this case, it was more often quadrupedal, but still, very similar. And we had Nick Boss, Saucy Dad, from TikTok on to talk about this, and this was a story he remembered firsthand from hearing about having grown up in Maine. So if you want to check somebody out who's actually, lived this story, go check him out on TikTok. Again, that is Saucy Dad. His name is Nick Boss, and, we've had him on the show. He's a great dude. But I've had you on the edge of your seat this entire video about something I mentioned in the first 3 seconds, which is the story of Inuit people doing it doggy style. And that is not in any way a derogatory or a pejorative. That is quite literally the story, because as the story goes, and in some cases this is seen as an origin story of the Inuit people versus the European people, but it originates in Greenland with the Inuit peoples of Greenland, where there was a young woman and she refused to be wed to any of the men of her tribe, and eventually she decided that she would rather marry a dog. And she did, and she and the dog had 10 children, but because she was afraid that these children would be treated poorly because, they were half dog, she made the decision to send 5 of them, the dog-like children, the ones that appeared to be normal dogs, to Europe, over the Eastern Sea, and she sent the humanoid ones, which are described as having the legs of dogs and the upper half of men, inland into Canada. So this story kind of goes throughout Greenland, Baffin, the Hudson Bay, that area, the very northern reaches of what's habitable in North America. And these creatures are referred to as adlets. And this is a term that in some cases has directly referred to certain inland, less, I don't want to use the term civilized, but less sophisticated tribes in the words of the Inuit people. It is also used to refer to a specific legendary tribe of Dogmen who are cannibalistic and terrorize people and, that are located throughout Canada. But what I find particularly interesting about this story is the connection with Europe. Because if you go and you look at Norse traditions, the Ulfhedna, the people who eventually we would get the term berserker about, would often dress in the pelts of wolves, with the mouth over their head, with their lower body painted or dyed black. And it's not enough of a connection to definitively say that this 8th and 7th century style of warrior is somehow connected to this as ancient as we even know story of how the Adlet came to be. But you've got to wonder, was there contact between these two people long before we thought about, or was this entire story a result of the contact between the Norse and the Inuits on Greenland? Could this have to do with the Vinland colony? Nobody really knows, because none of this is very well written down, but at the same time, it's very interesting to look at it and say, all right, well, way back in, for North America, prehistoric times, you had this story of a woman who mated with a dog and sent the dogs east to Europe with the prophecy that one day they would return as white men, essentially, and sent the other ones west into Canada as half-breed dogmen. And then over the years, in the northern colder reaches of America, you've got the story of the Palmyra Wolves and the Beast of Turner and the Michigan Dogman and the Beast of Bray Road. I'm not saying there is definitively a connection between any of these things, but it seems like the kind of thing where if you trace it back far enough, there could be. And I find that extraordinarily interesting. So, if you enjoy what we talk about here at the Lore Lodge, if you want to hear more stories like this, hit the notification bell, hit subscribe, smash the like button on this video, and if you want to see some pretty cool exclusive content, or just support us monetarily, you can check us out on Patreon at the Lore Lodge, and you can also check out anything that's in the description of this video in terms of links, and that includes our socials, which for me are the Aidan Mattis on essentially everything, or Director Aidan. He is the other guy. He's the guy behind the camera. Say hi to the people.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, that guy. So you can check him out at Director Aidan, or you can check us out at the Lore Lodge, and now at lorelodge.com. I'm Aidan Mattis, and thanks for stopping by the Lore Lodge. In SEO terms, this would be determined as keyword stuffing.
Yeah, but it's natural and unintentional.
Unintentional, yes. I wouldn't say it sounded natural. Anyway, thanks, guys.